Thank you. Welcome to today's lecture. My name is Godfrey Linguli from the School of Engineering, Department of Energy and Environmental Engineering. I'll be taking you through introduction to land economics. First, we start with the definitions. What land economics is. At the very basic level, land economics represents the relationship between man and land. And this relationship has been going on since man came to be, because as it is, man relates with land from birth up even to death. It is on land that man actually, we say, is born. It is on land that man acts a living or earns a living. It is on land that we study or do any other kind of activity. And finally, it is on land that someone is actually buried, whether cremated or buried or even on soil or even at sea. So it is a very important relationship that has been going on for since times when man came to be. It is the use of micro and macroeconomics to analyze the land use problems. What do we mean? That we try to use economic principles at the microeconomic level and macroeconomic level to actually solve issues related to land use. Micro, we talk about farms and households, how farms make their decision to consume and even to relate with productive activities within land. And also the farms. Farms, very, very critical in the production process and even the distribution and supply of the various goods and services that are then consumed by the households. Therefore, it is important to ensure that we optimize the way we use land so as we can be able to use it efficiently, because economic goods are very scarce, and land being one of the economic goods, in one sense, it's finite and it is even very limited in supply. So it is important to ensure that this finite good is actually used in a very, very prudent manner to ensure that there is no wastage or there is no misallocation, so that then we can be able to solve problems which arise as man continues to interact with land, as man continues to use land. Because, as we have said, man interacts with land throughout his life. So it is important to ensure that we harmonize this use and we don't bring conflict. Also, we do not jeopardize the other future generations who would like to exploit land in the future. That's why we talk about sustainable management of this finite and scarce resource in the name of land. So this, in land economics, we talk about allocation and even distribution, use and management of all latent resources. And this we are going to see thereafter what it means and how this process comes to be. What are the decisions that are made within the scope of land economics, so that we can be able to make decisions on how to allocate who uses land resources and the various other processes of distribution, use, and management. And for you students of land economics or real estate, how you interact with this commodity or with this land resource, it is very, very critical, because you will actually be making decisions on how to optimize its use. Definitely, there are a lot of economic concepts when it comes to how we look at land economics, and how we use the various components, the various economic principles to be able to analyze the problems of land use. So there will be terms like value, price, demand, supply, elasticity, utility, and how these are utilized in the way we use and manage land. What are the scope of decisions that are enshrined or are comprised in land economics? Land economics is a broad field and borrows heavily from other several disciplines. Disciplines like law, and in this, of course, we try to define land from a user right perspective. What are the rights that an owner of land enjoys within a piece of land? Otherwise, without ownership rights, then we cannot be able to talk about land or a land resource which has got any value whatsoever. So it is important for us as for the students of real estate to understand what are the implications of the legal discipline or law as a subject of study as far as land resource is concerned. And therefore, even the very legal definition of land, it must be defined with the aspect of user rights in mind, because land as a physical commodity cannot be able to become a useful or valuable or productive commodity if we do not exercise the appropriate interest in land. And for that matter, that's why even the definition of land comprises or involves user rights therein. How do we define land from a legal perspective? As the physical land, the soil, the ground, and also all the improvements, whether they are by hand of man or they are a work of nature. That is both man-made and natural improvements in land. And then we also add the rights therein and also the airspace above. So when we define land, we don't define it just from a very parochial perspective of just the soil. No, it goes deeper to the center of the earth and even higher to the heavens. In fact, in legal theory, a piece of land is defined as an inverted pyramid with its apex or tip going to the center of the earth and protruding upwards to the surface of the ground and extending upwards to the high skies. So it is important to ensure that we have this in mind. Otherwise, our perspective of land, if we only look at land from a physical perspective, then we are not going to be to have gotten the correct kind of perspective on land. Next, it borrows on economics. Economics generally looks at land from a perspective of production or productivity, a factor of production. And land is a basic factor of production. There are other factors of production, of course, that will come combined with land so that we can have productivity. And these are labor, we have entrepreneurship, and we also have capital. The three main factors, the labor, land, and capital, are combined in a very efficient and productive manner through the use of entrepreneurial skills or entrepreneurship so that we can have productivity or we can have production. Therefore, it is important to ensure that we, in the management or in the way we relate with land, we don't lose sight of its productive capacity and how we can be able to maximize this productivity. Remember that we need to see how can we increase productivity without increasing cost. How do we increase the marginal productivity of the inputs that we put or that we actually utilize in the production process, so that we don't have a situation whereby we're increasing inputs with a name of having productivity, but at the same time, we are increasing costs. The other aspects, of course, is geography as a discipline that land economics borrows from, and this has to deal with the physical nature or the physical characteristics of land and how these interact, or how these influence human activities. How do the physical characteristics influence human activities on land? For example, in real estate, we will be informed by the terrain of land to make decisions on where to locate activities. We'll be informed by the conditions or soil characteristics to make decisions on the kind of foundations that we will have for the improvement of buildings that we have to build. So geography is very important in the way we perceive the scope of land economics. What are the main decisions that we make? Access to land rights. And as I've said, this is borrowed from law, that we need to recognize how do we own land and what are the interests that can be exercised on land. One of that, of course, will be the nature of tenure. Tenure being the way we own, or actually the mode of owning land, in what kind of term. How do we own land? And principally, there are three basic ownership modes in Kenya, or forms of tenure, systems of tenure. This being the public, where the access rights or the user rights are actually allocated to a public entity. There is community, where the community is vested with the power of management and even the use of a particular piece of land. For example, in a community where there are no individual parcellations or there are no individual titles, the entire community can have rights to actually farm on that land or even graze on that land without excluding any member of that community. And then in that also we find that such lands are vested in the county government. For example, in our current constitutional dispensation, where we have the county government and the devolved government in the name of county government. So it is important for us to ensure that we look at how land is held, even as we continue to interact with it, to relate with it, to use it in the productive processes, so that we don't overstep our mandate in the use and management. The other one is the property interest. Property interest, I believe you have already been introduced to this concept in the introduction to real estate, the various forms of ownership interest in land, and also in your other related units like real estate law. But basically, property interest, these include the freehold interest and the leasehold interest. Freehold interest being the interest that an individual enjoys with almost an unlimited kind of powers. But they vary between one form and the other. In freehold estates, we have interests such as fee simple. Fee simple is the absolute ownership, where you have an individual enjoying almost unlimited ownership interest in land. Very, very long. You can use it the way you want, and you can dispose it to any person that you actually determine. So it is important to ensure that even as you try to access rights in land, you determine what kind of nature or form that you need. Others include fee-tail. Fee-tail is like absolute, fee-tail is like fee simple, which is absolute, but fee-tail has a little kind of a difference. And the difference is this, that while in fee simple, Any blood relative can inherit your piece of land when you die without a will. In fetail, it is only the direct descendants. That means your children or grandchildren, your blood lineage, direct descendants. And for that case, if, for example, a person dies without a child and it is a fetail, it means that interest in land is going to come to an end and the land will revert back to the state. We're saying that the state has the absolute ownership of land because it has actually what we call the allodial title. It is not subject to any other sovereign body within a jurisdiction. All what we enjoy as citizens, we enjoy estates or interest in land for various kind of terms, some of which, like fee simple, are almost unlimited. They can actually continue in perpetuity. The other aspect, of course, or the other form of interest of freehold that we can talk of is the conditional fee simple. Just a fee simple, but with conditions. If the condition happens, then it means that that kind of interest comes to an end. Life estate is another very important form of freehold estate, whereby the length and term of an estate is measured by the life of the holder of that estate. So if I enjoy a life estate, the life estate will come to an end, or that ownership, title, or interest in land is going to come to an end once I die. The final one is life estate per outre vie. And this is just a life estate, only that the measuring life of this estate is not the one who is holding that title. The measuring life is another person, such that you always be pleading for the continued living of this individual, so that then the more he lives, the more you enjoy your interest in land. And very, very interesting. Then let's look at management and use of land and landed resources. We said these resources are very finite, and these resources are scarce. Landed resources are scarce. So what does that mean? It means we need to optimize and prudently and efficiently use this finite and scarce resource. And how do we do that? We do that through proper management and use. And in real estate course, we teach you about property management as one of the units. So you will be exposed to various other concepts of property management, the best practices, and how do you do it or carry it out to ensure that you optimize the returns from land and landed resources. You actually even continue to ensure that utility is maximized and value is preserved. Very important, and these decisions fall within the scope of land economics. Valuation and appraisal of land. Valuation is yet another core area that as students of real estate you go through, and this involves how you actually determine property values, land values, landed resource values. And how is it done? It is done through the proper and careful methodology that you are taken through in the valuation processes. And what does it involve? It involves estimation of property prices that are likely to be exchanged between the various players within the market in arm's length transactions, not transactions between parties, but arm's length transactions within the open market. Therefore, the concepts of value will be stressed much more in the valuation units, but this one is a key area within the scope of land economics, because if we have to use resources or finite resources efficiently and prudently, we need to know their values so that we can also try to allocate them prudently between the users who are able to actually allocate them or use them in the best way possible. This will also include aspects of taxation, and in taxation we talk about the government raising revenue, and this is done through various aspects and through various ways. For example, through use of the rating. Rating is done by the county government, whereby land is assessed or properties are assessed, or both land and improvement are assessed for the purposes of having a percentage of that value being paid to the county government or to the county authority as rates. Also, there is ground rent that is paid to the government. This is in terms of a portion of that land being worked out, and that is computed through a process of valuation to ensure that the proper ground rent or rent for that land is actually paid to the government. The other aspect, which the set of decisions that are taken in relation to land economics, has to do with the disposition of interest in land. Now, disposition is about parting possession with interest in land, transfer of property interest, transfer of property rights, and there are various forms such as sale, where an individual in his or her own volition determines to part possession and actually sell his interest in property in an open market without any kind of other intervening factors. There is also through will. You can decide, when I die, my property can be transferred or can be given to this and this party as the administrator, as the beneficiary of my estates. Dedication being a process whereby individuals, when actually they feel benevolent enough, they can be able to give back a part of their property to the public for the purposes of enhancing the welfare of the community. And we have seen this where you see an individual subdividing part of his land and giving that part of land to the government for the construction of a school or any other public utility facility. Foreclosure, this has to do with selling a property so that it can satisfy a debt. This happens a lot, whereby you find that a property has been used as collateral for the purposes of accessing a loan from a financial institution. Therefore, if someone is unable to pay, that property can be transferred to the party that has advanced that facility or that debt or that loan to satisfy that debt. Condemnation is the power, the eminent power for governments to actually compulsorily take an individual's land, but it has to be via, or it has to have fair compensation. That's the only thing that is required. If the government, through the exercise of the power of its eminent domain, it can actually take up your land, but for public purposes, not for private uses, and it should be at a fair compensation. And valuers, students of real estate, again, this will be part of your work. You will be determining what is fair value that the government, for example, can pay as compensation for property which has been taken compulsorily through the process of condemnation. Now, that process of the government exercising this power of eminent domain is what we refer to as condemnation. Escheat, a process whereby someone dies without without any will and without heirs who can inherit the estate of the dead person or deceased person. Therefore, this means that the property goes back to the state. We said the state has got their laudio title. It is the radical owner of all land within its jurisdiction. And therefore, if no other person, a legal, a person who is empowered in law can claim that, there is no will, there is no heir, then the property, through the process of escheat, goes back to the state. Adverse possession, this also we see it a lot, even here in Kenya, but it is not very much exercised. But it's a provision in law that can actually be exercised. Squatters can exercise this right under adverse possession and take up land which they have occupied for a continuous period of time. How does this happen? It happens, for example, in many jurisdictions, the term is between 5 years and 30 years. Here in Kenya, 12 years is good enough. But for this to happen, then someone has to prove that has actually continuously occupied that land for the set period of 12 years and without any breaks. And then it must be open. It could be seen at mere inspection by anybody. It should also be very notorious that you were there, it was known, and no one stopped you. It must be hostile, that it was against the owner's interest, not that you were given, not that it was let to you even at no rent. It should be hostile, and then it needs to be adverse, that it is disadvantaging the owner of that property. Now, let's look at the related terms. Related terms to land economics. We have urban economics, which is application of land economic principles in an urban setup. Now, in urban economics, we can look at a little bit wider variables and other inputs other than land. But the relationship between land economics and urban economics is that we use the principles of land economics to actually deal with the problems of land use in the urban area. And therefore, it is concerned with allocation of the urban space. How efficiently we allocate the urban space. Very important, because the urban area has got very significant consequences if it is not allocated well. The externalities or the bad side effects of improper use and allocation of the urban area are dire. We can have congestion, we can have emergence of slums, we can have noise, we can have pollution, because there is concentration of people and there is conflict of land users. But when used well, then of course it will be to the advantage or progression of the well-being of the community at large. The other one is regional economics, which is similar to urban economics, only that now we are talking about a wider geographical area. This area basically deals with regions, because we are talking about regional economics. We are talking about regions. A region is an area which has uniform features. And these uniform features, there must be delimitations. There must be boundaries that mark and define this region. And there are various ways of actually looking at this region or trying to identify what region we are talking about. It could be physical. We can talk about savanna. We can talk about the desert region. We can talk about the ASAL region, the arid and semi-arid lands region. It could be political or administrative. We talk about countries. We talk about Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. These are regions which are politically or administratively been created We can talk about counties within a country, constituencies or provinces. Very, very important perspectives to look at. Economic, we look at regions in terms of economic trading blocks, like East African Community. We can talk about COMESA region for the Eastern and Southern Africa, SADC for the Southern Africa, ECOWAS for the Western Africa, EU for the European Union for Europe. Therefore, we can have various kinds of the way we conceptualize regions. Race, we can talk about Africans, Indians, we can talk about Europeans, and related. It is important to categorize these regions so that we can be able to analyze the problems of land use or the land use activities within those areas. And regional economics deals not only now with land use issues, but also other variables within that region. What about the significance of land economics? Is it important for us to study land economics? The answer is a resounding yes. I've already explained that land, being a factor of production, amongst other factors, is very, very critical. And therefore, it is important for us to study it so that we can be able to increase productivity. Individual households need information so that they can be able to make their decisions. In fact, households, these are the major consumers. Households are major consumers of the economic goods and services. Therefore, the more they know about land or land and resources, the better they can be able to consume this product. And therefore, it is important to have a field of study that helps the individual households to be able to consume or to relate with this land resource so that they can be able to maximize or optimize its use. The other significance is that communities in general require this information, this knowledge. They require to know how they can properly allocate land resources. Remember, we talked about the externalities of poor allocation of land resources, like slums, like pollution. It is important to ensure that good allocation is exercised to ensure that the welfare of the community is actually maximized. Farms or businesses and industries, these are producers, the distributors of products, of goods and services. And for them, it's about production. It's about distribution. So it is important to ensure that they are well informed in a timely manner about where to locate their industries or businesses and where can they be able to maximize their production in terms of the costs of the inputs and also in terms of the market catchment areas, so that then if you can be able to produce at lower inputs, land included, and you can be able to maximize your revenues through very vibrant markets, then it is important to ensure that this information actually gets to the farms at or within the times when they require to make these decisions. If the information is late, then we are going to disadvantage some investment opportunities that could have taken place. We will lose those opportunities, and therefore the economy as a whole will continue to be disadvantaged. The other aspect is government. Government, of course, uses land economics or land economists a lot because we said it is the custodian, it's the one which guarantees title, it's the one which holds land within a jurisdiction in absolute terms and then gives estates to individuals. Therefore, it is important to ensure that government has the correct inventory of this land and land resource, so that then if you have a good inventory, you know what is there, you can now make decisions on allocation. How do you allocate. And part of management of the inventory, we talk about cadastre management, whereby we talk about having the correct details of each and every parcel of land in terms of the size, in terms of the ownership rights and the ownership interest therein, to ensure then we can be able to manage our landed resources better. Land taxation, which is used for various purposes, I've already said that it can be used to raise revenue. It can also be used as a fiscal tool in order to encourage development of land or landed resources in certain directions. It is therefore important to ensure that knowledge of land economics is used to guide this information so that we can be able to optimize the way we use or the way we interact with land as a finite resource that needs to be optimized so that we can have a higher productivity. Alienation, I've already talked about it, is another one for transfer of interest. Therefore, government will need this knowledge so that the process of transfer of interest can be as smooth as possible, and these interests can be transferred to the people or to institutions which have the ability and capability of enhancing productivity. Let's look at land use. Land use comprises the way land is used, the activities that are performed or carried out within a given spatial unit. The totality of these activities, whether they are residential, whether they are commercial, what are the activities that are carried within a given piece of land, which we are calling or referring to as a spatial unit. And it encompasses the management and modification of the natural environment. We modify the natural environment and come up with what? Landed properties, built up properties. We improve the natural environment through the process of land use. When that is done, then we can be able to characterize and say the land use within this area or within this parcel of land is land use X or Y, as the case may be. There are two main categories of land. We can categorize land in form of rural land use or urban land use, depending with where this land is actually located. Urban land uses, these are comprised of the various activities that are carried out within the urban space. And key among these is the commercial land use. The commercial, where we have the shops, the offices, and this has a very high competition because the CBD, as we shall discuss later, is the focal point, which is demanded so much by the business enterprises because of its ability to be able to produce and its ability to be able to generate revenue or income. Residential, we have apartments, single rooms, bensitas, bungalows, maisonette, townhouses, and I believe as you have already been introduced to these concepts and what the various accommodation details regarding or touching on these residential properties and their terms. Industrial, we talk about warehouses and factories, whether they are light or whether they are heavy kind of manufacturing activities. And the next we have recreational. We talk about hotels, amusement parks, open spaces, where people need to take time and relax. They need to entertain themselves. Remember, in the urban areas, there is a lot of congestion. because there is a lot of demand for land and competition for space. Therefore, we do not have idle land or big chunks of land which have not been utilized within the urban area. As a result, we need spaces where people can be able to relax and re-energize themselves as they continue to engage in the other economic productive activities. Special purpose, this has to deal with the special kind of users which do not fall under those other categories, like, of course, education or security, like religious worship. All these institutions which require to be located within the urban area then will fall under that user. Remember, I'm talking about user because in technical terms, the land use, the subject land use, is referred to as user, not the person who is using, but the activity under which that piece of land is put under. Rural land uses, mainly the main one is agricultural, whereby we have farms. We can talk about farming or livestock keeping, greenhouses, the type of structures found there, farmhouses. Farmhouse is the main building where the manager of the farm stays. We are not referring to it as a residential house. It's a farmhouse because the main activity of this user is agricultural, and therefore the aim of this house is to ensure that the farm is managed in the best way possible, and that's why we call it farmhouse. Labor lines, these comprise of the residential accommodation units for the workers who are working within those farms. Then there's residential users, bungalows, the maisonettes, the single rooms, bedsitters, and the like. Commercial, we have shops and the markets within those rural setups. There are markets and the shopping centers. Recreational, we have hotels, amusement parks, open parks, for those who need. But remember, in the rural areas, we have a lot of space, and therefore these may not be as vibrant as in the urban areas. Special purpose, we have the same kind of institutions because services need to go everywhere to every citizen, whether in the urban or rural areas. For example, we need health centers or security amenities, the police posts and positions across all land users, whether it's in the urban area or whether it is in the rural areas. Let's talk now about land use decision makers, who are the individuals or entities that make decisions regarding how land is used. Let's start with central government and how does it affect the process of decision making or the process of how land is used within a given area. This is done through policy regulations, and here we can talk about the land policy, and later on you will be learning or taking a unit by the name land policy, whereby you are going to get deeper into the issues or policies that guide how land is managed and how land is used within a given jurisdiction. Land use planning policies, these mainly vested, these are the general guide on how land is going to be used within given set parameters. And this is usually implemented by the county governments in form of their various bylaws or even the various regulations, planning regulations that they exercise, like zoning, change of user, intensity of use, and related. Direct investment in infrastructure. Government can invest in roads, power, sewer. It can be able to invest in security amenities and other kind of infrastructure development to ensure that they attract individual households or even farms to locate their activities. When they locate their activities, then we have specific land use activities taking place. And therefore, government can be able, through direct investment, shape the way land use actually, how land is used within an area. Fiscal tools, these include taxation and government expenditure. If government decides to tax some certain types of property, then it means that demand for that kind of property is going to go down. Therefore, that kind of land use is going to go down, or it's going to shift. If government gives tax breaks, for example, in a particular area, preferential trade areas, it means that then it's going to encourage that kind of land use. If we are talking about government expenditure in form of infrastructure development, that's a fiscal tool that can direct and shape the way that land is used in a given area or in a given asset class. It also determines the direction. The direction. Are we encouraging more and more residential houses, or are we encouraging more and more industrial land use through the various kind of taxation and expenditure measures that we are going to come up with as a government? Another way that the government influences land use is through the monetary policy. How does this happen? This is mainly through the manipulation of the cost of money via or through the central bank. This happens in two ways. The central bank can actually fluctuate the rate at which it lends money to the commercial banks, which we call the central bank rate, for example, here in our Kenyan case. Therefore, if that rate is high, it means that banks cannot be able to lend money at a cheaper rate to the users of these funds in form of farms to use in productive activities and the individuals for consumption activities. It is therefore important to ensure that this cost of money in terms of the CBR rate is fair enough, and it is done in such a way that it is going to stimulate the uptake of this money when it is on led to the farms for the purposes of productive activities. Remember, we said that the land and land resources require huge amounts of capital, and therefore, of essence, the farms who are involved in the production process, or even the individuals who are involved in the consumption, or even as they continue to build or even buy the various components or properties within the land markets or within the property market, they will require actually to borrow from commercial banks. Therefore, it is important for the government to ensure that the cost of money is fair enough so that it can stimulate land use through the availability, cheaper availability of credit. The other aspect is the CRR, or the cash reserve ratio, which then determines the amount of cash that the banks, commercial banks, are required to deposit at the central bank. If this rate is high, then it means the financial institutions, the banks, will be deprived of cash that they would otherwise be lending to farms and individuals, which they can use in their trading or in their construction, in their buying of interest or buying of interest in property. That is land, houses, and this comes in all forms of all types of properties within the land sector, as we have already said. Next is the county government. How does county government influence land use? This mainly is through the bylaws and legislations such as zoning and the development control. Later on, we are going to touch on this to see how does the county government manage to regulate or even to allocate users according to zone. Next is direct investment in infrastructure and housing, and county governments can do this to stimulate or even to attract people to probably even use land in certain ways. For example, they can attract people to settle in certain areas because they have provided water, they have provided electricity and roads. In other times, for example, in Nairobi, we have seen in the past county governments even providing housing, which meant that more and more land was put under the residential user. We also talk about the corporate bodies. How do they influence land use? This will be through direct investments in land and projects. I've already explained that these ones, of essence, they will need to even borrow money from the various other financial institutions so that they can be able to carry out development activities or projects. And if this is done, then land use forms will essentially change. Policies like banks, how they lend is very important because it ensures availability of credit to carry out activities or land use activities. Of course, we have seen also banks, the way they lend is affected by the way the government manages its monetary policy. Individuals is through direct investments. I've already touched on this at length. The other one is professional consultants. And how do they do this? They do this in a number of ways. Policy making, because these have been schooled or they have been taught, they have knowledge on how to actually carry out or interact in the most prudent manner with the land and land resource. And therefore, they can be able to inform policy to ensure that production or productivity is maximized. The other one is through feasibility for investment advisory, and this because the real estate professionals who have been schooled in land economics issues and related concepts, they can be able to effectively advise investors as they carry out the investment in land and landed properties. They can carry out due diligence because they are they are competent in matters related to interest in land, values in land, values of properties, how to acquire and even how to dispose. The other one is through research. They can carry out research to expand the available body of knowledge so that then more and more activities and even how policies developed within this land sector is actually executed. Advocacy, we have groups and bodies within the land sector who come up with various advisories and positions and try to ensure that land and land resources are used in the most prudent and effective manner. Land valuation for taxation purposes, I've already touched on this and how real estate professionals come in to ensure that they assess land for the purposes of enabling the authorities, whether at county or national government, to actually get revenues from land. Zoning and land use requirements, again, the actors within this sector have hands-on information and experience when it comes to all aspects that are touching on the land resource. Factors determining location. Two key issues that I would like to bring forth before I go to individual households, how they locate. The concept of general accessibility and special accessibility. General accessibility generally deals with how individuals or households have convenience and save time and cost to access services of social and physical infrastructure. Very important. And also in terms of the households, in terms of farms, how farms maximize their revenue earning capacity. And how does this happen? It happens if they are located in a focal point, a point like the CBD or the Central Business District. So if they are located in that focal point, then it means that they can be able to enhance or to maximize their revenue earning capacity. And therefore, that comprises the general accessibility and forms the framework under which we look at the other locational factors. When we talk about spatial accessibility means or deals with the factors of concentration, or what we call agglomeration factors, economies of concentration. What are the benefits when people stay together? What are the benefits when farms locate in one particular area? These are agglomeration economies or economies of concentration. And for individuals, for example, we can talk about services. They can enjoy services. If they locate at the same, within the same neighborhood, it is easier to provide services. It is also, it also has some social kind of bearing, because you find that people of the same race, people of the same class, people of the same maybe religious beliefs, sometimes they tend to locate within the same neighborhoods. This is special accessibility because there are some benefits which they derive as a result of locating within the same locality. For farms, it is about three things. One, about markets. They can be able to, when they locate at the same place, they can maximize their ability to attract customers. For example, if we are talking about clothes, if you have stores which are located within a particular street, every person will know that if I need a particular type of cloth, if I go to this street, I will not walk out of that street without a cloth. And therefore, more and more customers will flock along stores in that street so that they can be able to shop. Collectively, you are going to have more customers and more business which takes place within that neighborhood. That's market. And then we also talk about skilled labor availability. We can have, like for example, in Nairobi CBD, for example, if you want to locate some certain kind of businesses, you are assured that you are going to have skilled labor to be able to carry out that activity. But if you locate it in another place, maybe in the rural areas, you may lack skilled labor. So it is important to ensure that actually we have or we benefit from the special accessibility perspective, from the farm's perspective. So it is important to ensure that this happens. Also, the issue of services. Farms, of course, will enjoy this special accessibility when they locate together in an area where services have been provided, transportation services, for example, power, where we are talking about even three-phase power and the like. Now, looking at these factors, I've seen that they are based on the above criteria, general and special accessibility. Individual households, they look at the cost of purchase or rent so that they know where to locate. If you are building, of course, you look at what is the price, how much does it cost me before I can decide that's where I locate my residential dwelling. Or if you want to rent, what is the rent? Accommodation needs in terms of the family size. If you have a family size which is which is big, then of course you cannot be in a single room and the like. The other is taste and preferences. This is determined by what you like, and it will also be determined by the amount of income which you have, household income, the ability to pay. Don't only desire, but also you need to look at the size of your pocket. Next is the proximity to relevant physical and social infrastructure services. Very key, because someone would like to locate in an area where you feel that you can access medical attention or health facilities. It is secure. It is, you have places of worship. There are schools in the neighborhood, shops, and related. Safety and reputation of the neighborhood, again tied to the income. The more reputable a neighborhood is, the more you will be required to, it will cost you. Institutional factors such as zoning. Now, zoning is allocation of users for specific areas. So it means that there are areas where you cannot be able to locate your residential dwelling because it is zoned for other users. So that's how zoning or institutional factors come into play. For businesses, we are talking about markets. I will not overemphasize this because I've already talked about this earlier. Type of business, the space requirements that some business needs, for example, even like industries, they require extensive land or a lot of land. Others, like offices, they require many people within some little space. Therefore, space needs will determine where businesses locate their activities. Personal factors, some business owners, it has been proved that they can make personal choices to determine where they locate their businesses, maybe near their families or residences. Institutional factors, this in form of zoning and taxation, I've already covered that, and I've explained how this affects activities or location activities. Required physical, social, and physical services such as transport, power, and banks. And lastly, agglomeration needs, which I've already introduced under special accessibility. Let's look at land markets. Land markets are viewed as decentralized markets. It's not a single entity. It's not a market or centralized market where buyers and sellers of land and landed properties can come and actually carry out their transactions. Because of this localized or decentralized nature of land and landed properties, it then becomes a very unique market, and it requires special knowledge for you to be able to effectively trade or transact within this market. And we say land markets are very imperfect, very, very imperfect. Why? Because there is a lot of secrecy in transactions. There is information, you do not know who is selling what, at what price. That's what we call information asymmetry. And this is done because people try to hide their cards, and they do not want to be known that they are selling land. Number two, they don't want to declare the full value of land or price of land because they want to reduce their stamp duty obligations. Again, they are imperfect. Land markets are very imperfect because each property is very unique. Unique in terms of structural differences. They are constructed differently. They have different accommodation in terms of rooms and the sizes. Finishes, variously finished. It's not like, because when we are talking about perfect markets, we talk about homogeneous product. But here we have very unique products. And other aspects, of course, include ownership interest, very, very varied, encumbrances. These are the claims against title, which are also very unique. The users, they have commercial, residential, industrial, all these make property to be very unique and therefore very imperfect. Government control, a lot of control. I've already taken you through the various components or the various areas and how government steps in within to control the land markets, from the land use policies to the process of acquisition, where you want the consents for you to be allowed to transfer land, the development control by the county government and the like. And therefore, there is a lot of control, no free entry and exit into the market. Indivisibility and immobility of property, it is fixed in location. I've already talked about that. It can't move. No central place where you can bring your land and landed properties. Lastly, costly and protracted transactions. This means that the process is quite costly because of the various steps that you go through as you transfer properties. You need legal fees, you need to pay special taxes, you need to actually carry out searches. So the process, even before you come to pay the purchase price, you may even be required to pay subdivision fees if the property was not subdivided in the first instance. So the process is very protracted, complicated, and it is also costly. Demand for land and landed property, demand, of course, being the number of people or the number of potential buyers and renters who seek certain property interests in a given time, in a given market. Therefore, this is what represents demand of landed properties, because there are various interests that are demanded. So the totality of those potential people or buyers will represent the demand for land and landed properties. And what determines that? Expectations of future use, such as speculation, a government taxation policy. I've already highlighted how government taxation policy can reduce demand or can enhance demand. Demographic changes. Do we have more and more young people growing up and they require property to settle? Therefore, if they require, then more and more property will be demanded. Changes in taste and preferences, institutional factors such as lending and land use policies, which I've already highlighted. Finally, we look at the supply of landed property, which represents the quantity of property interests that are available for sale or for rent. Quantity of interests that are available for sale or for rent within a market at the various prices. And what determines this? Determined by price, though we note that for property, price of real estate does not determine the supply in the short run, because we have said it takes long. It's a protracted process. Therefore, if, for example, there was very good demand and the supply prices were, property prices were high. Therefore, if we have many farms or households or people going into the landed markets to build properties, and the prices fall in the next 4-6 months, those who have started the process of building will not abandon their product because the prices are falling. They will continue. And that's why we are saying prices do not affect supply in the short run. But in the long run, of course, it is going to affect. Government taxation policy, that has been covered in form of capital gains, rental tax. Capital gains is a tax that is charged when you transfer property. You consider at what price you bought it at and the sale price, and the difference, what you have gained, is taxed. Rental tax, that's tax on rent, and the tax breaks. Demographic changes with accompanying movements. This is as more people move on and build their own properties, then they can leave other properties which can be taken up by other groups, a process which we call adaptive or filtering down model of housing supply. The other one is natural disasters and demolitions. Definitely when there are earthquakes of lands, we lose property and therefore supply is affected. Planning, that is institutional factors such as lending and land use policies. That includes planning, which is very, very key in determining supply of land. Zoning, you determine what properties can be located or built in a particular neighborhood. Change of user, you can change from low density, for example, one bungalow on 1 acre, and you can change user into a multi-family apartments. And instead of accommodating that 1 acre, accommodating only one family, you can have it accommodating even 50 families. And therefore, that change increases supply of property. Lastly is the intensity of land use. This has to deal with the ground coverage, how you use land. If a plot, for example, is 100 by 100, that is assuming it's 1,000, for example, 1,000 square meters, you can be allowed to use 50% or to cover 50% of that land or that plot. That means you can build up to 500 square meters of that particular land. Plot ratio is about in relation to the size of the land. If it's that 1,000 square meters, how high can you be able to go in terms of using that land? If you have, for example, a plot ratio of 1, that means you can only build up to 1,000 square meters because the size of the plot is 1,000 square meters. If your ground coverage is 100%, that means that you only build 1 story. But if your ground coverage is 50%, that's half, it means you can cover that plot to an extent of 500 square meters. Then you need another top floor of 500 meters so that you can be able to utilize the 1,000 square meters or the plot ratio of 1. So therefore, the relationship between intensity of land use, the relationship between ground coverage and plot ratio, and helps people or helps developers to understand and to know how they can be able to build within a given plot in terms of how much they cover and in terms of how high they can be able to go up. So if they are allowed to go up higher, it means that the supply of housing or the supply of property goes up. If it is reduced then or maintained, then also the consequences are to the effect that you reduce supply or you maintain supply. That's the end of our lecture today. Thank you for listening.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.